All right, well, welcome everyone to our second year grant announcement. My name is Eddie Gonzalez. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Grants for the Chesapeake Bay office based here in Annapolis. Just to ground us a little bit, we're here going to be talking about this year's cycle of network grants for the Chesapeake Bay Gateways and Water Trails Network. I did want to highlight two guiding philosophies that we're utilizing for these sets of grants. One is the authority that's been given to us by the Chesapeake Bay Initiative to provide technical and financial assistance that identifies, conserves, restores, and interprets the natural, recreational, historical, and cultural resources within the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We're very happy that our legislation is very broad. And it covers the full breadth of all the cool things there is to do and see and experience in the watershed. So definitely wanted us grounded in that starting philosophy. And then that there's a general encouragement by the federal government to really utilize our resources to help bring more equity across all the different audiences that we have the ability to impact. Especially those that have been historically underserved. So you'll see that as part that's built into the grants. Before we jump into the specifics of the grant, again, just wanted to give you a sense of the landscape that we're working with. So our office covers the full 41 million acre watershed. Anything that's found within that boundary are programs and projects that we can support. We do this work through three different major programs and initiatives that our office is involved with. One of which is Chesapeake Gateways, which you'll hear more about because that's the program that's driving the grants. We also are part of a multi-state and federal partnership called the Chesapeake Bay program that has a lot of different technical and programmatic goals and objectives for the preservation and protection of the Chesapeake Bay. And then there's the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership, which is an effort that's, again, compiled of a number of different state and federal and nonprofit partners, but all really working to conserve large swaths of landscapes across the watershed, particularly those that represent key resources or assets that are critical to continuing to tell the Chesapeake story. So within this, I mentioned we have a really broad legislation, and because of that, it really allows us to be active in a number of different scales. So as an office, we're both looking at the large landscapes of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. You can break up the watershed not only in some of the inland geographies, but also all the major rivers that flow through the watershed. So each of those has its own target audiences, its own stories, its own institutions and locations that are telling the Chesapeake story. From there, we're able to then zero in on specific sites to support that are representations of the Chesapeake Bay watershed within the context that they focus on. And then a program that you'll start hearing more about in the coming months is a community level view at the work that we're trying to do. So more than individual sites where we are reaching a critical mass of a certain formula of partners all working together towards some sort of community-based goals and objectives. I'll bring us back to the Chesapeake Bay Initiative because it is what drives everything that we do in this office. It's the legislation that created our office, so it's a document that we frequently refer back to as we're considering new efforts or advancing our current efforts. I highlighted this point in blue, which I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, because that is really what's driving our office establishing and issuing these grants, is that through our authority, we do have the ability to provide technical and financial assistance. But another thing to highlight is that the target institutions and entities that we can work with is also extremely broad and unique to the Park Service. Our legislation also specifically calls out the private sector. So a lot of the tour operators, a lot of the for-profit partners that people might be working with would be organizations that would be eligible to apply, and we'll highlight that a little more as we go. Also, as we're going through this, please put questions in the chat. We'll have a Q&A at the end as well, but I'll try to answer them as we go. So if anything pops out that you need some clarification on, definitely put it in the chat, or feel free to unmic as well. So earlier when I was describing the three programs, the Chesapeake Gateways is what is providing the funds and is the program that's backing these network grants. In addition to the grants, it's how our office is defined is through our annual $3 million appropriations. We split up those dollars into three different buckets of support. One is through technical assistance. So we have a number of partnerships where we're providing technical assistance opportunities to the network, as well as our own staff being able to provide technical assistance within the expertise and the capacity that we all represent. We have a strategic pot that we work on to be able to address projects that come up in a particular fiscal year that are addressing some part of our strategic plan or move us towards some sort of collaboration or partnership effort that provides impact to the Chesapeake watershed. And then the last segment that we'll be talking about more today is bringing online a grants division, and this will be the second year of us giving out network grants. See where my cursor went. There we go. So quick highlights of the current grant opportunity that's being made available. And again, it should seem very similar to last year. There are a couple of things in the criteria that I'll highlight that we did change further down in the presentation. But for now, the quick summary is, again, we have about $1 million that I mentioned earlier to give away. We're looking at two sizes of grants. It's not two different applications. All of the applications will come through the one notice, but we're going to be looking at the projects in terms of scale. So smaller grants would be somewhere in the 25 to 50,000 range, and then larger grants are going to be in the 51 to 150,000. We don't have an expectation of how many in each. So we really are looking for you to apply with the resources that you would need to accomplish your project. I think the first thing to mention is, there's a point where multiple people look at the budgets to determine if what you're requesting is realistic and relevant to what you're proposing in your project. So at this stage, I would say, just be mindful of what you're trying to accomplish through the proposal that you're going to be submitting, and make sure that the money that you are requesting is adequate. I will say in a lot of cases, people were just going for the maximum, which if that's the size of the project, that's great. But I did notice in other cases, there were smaller projects that either hadn't built in their indirect cost or definitely were leaving some resources on the table where they didn't include all the budget items that they should. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But just be mindful of the scale of impact that you're trying to. Oh, yep, the deadline, you are correct. I totally missed it. This is last year's deadline. I apologize. I will fix that when the slides come to you. The deadline is November 3rd, and it is listed elsewhere. So thanks for catching that. And then two grant categories, I'll explain a little bit further down as well, but the same two grant categories we had from last year: inclusive interpretation initiatives, and then efforts that promote resilient communities and landscapes. These grants also do have a focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and community engagement. So we are looking for that next level engagement in the projects that are being submitted, but it's really up to you to define what that next level engagement is based on where you see your communities needing to go. And then also a great thing that we're able to include is no match requirement. The authority that we're using allows us to provide this support without requiring a match. And we know that's important, especially for some of the smaller organizations that are new to federal grants. This gives you a nice opportunity to jump in without having to carry the burden of a match requirement. And then I highlighted earlier, we do have our legislation allows for a broad range of eligible entities. So we're really excited at the types of organizations that can apply and that we did see apply. Last year, we had applications from organizations that we had never worked with before. So it was great to see that. Okay, I see here, if there is a match available, does it need to be included? So, one of the things I'm going to caution people on is putting too much information in your proposal. There were proposals last year that they were part of larger projects, and we were given the larger either project budgets or project narratives, and it became very difficult to filter down to what an application was asking from us. So, there is no requirement for the match. It won't add any sort of benefit to you bringing a match to the project. So I would just say, if it doesn't confuse what money you're asking us for, you're certainly welcome to include that, and the forms allow you to list the non-federal or the non-requested parts of your budget. But it's not a requirement to list the match requirements, or if you have match monies available. Also, all the projects have to have a public purpose, and I'll mention what that is further down in the presentation, and they all have to occur in the watershed. We do have a frequently asked questions document that we've compiled that has a lot of different variations of this question of, here's my scenario, am I eligible? So we'll work through a lot of those in the Q&A. Okay, I'm seeing other questions about the past projects. So we are still trying to finalize the past the year one round, and at whatever point that information becomes available, we do anticipate that it would be available before the close of the November deadline, so folks can see what projects were selected in year one.
Hi, Eddie. Another question we had in the chat, and Sherry Esperson, Partnerships Coordinator with NPS Chesapeake. Thanks, everyone, for joining. But earlier, we also got a question in the chat from Meg Bacco, if I'm saying that correctly, from Prince George's County, Maryland State Heritage Area, and asking, how do I request feedback on an unfunded application from last year?
Everybody should have gotten a notice from our grants website with your status. You could just email that back, or I'm going to put my email address in the chat. Just send me a note saying that you would like feedback, and I've got a folder started with everybody that's requested so that I can get those rating summaries back to you.
Thank you.
Sure. Oh, and let me see, that should have gone to everyone. Let me put that back in. All right, so yeah, that's my email address. Feel free to just send me a quick note saying, hey, here was our project. We'd like to get feedback, and I'll add it to the queue. And then the last piece here, which has already been mentioned, an incorrect deadline. Our deadline is November 3rd, 2023. So just under 2 months from today's date. All right, so what is a grant? I wanted to highlight this because as a financial assistance vehicle, this is only our second year giving out grants. They are a legal instrument for the government, so there are a lot of components to the process. It is a very formal process that you will be asked to participate in, and getting through either selection and then to an award. I did want to highlight that grants do have very specific components that we have to adhere. And I'm hearing some feedback. If folks can just mute their phones if they're not. Thanks. The first one is that it has to carry out a public purpose, and I'll bring that up again in a second, and that there's no substantial involvement from our agency. So as reviewers are looking at these proposals, they're going to be looking at how well each applicant created a sense that they know what the project at hand entails, they know what the need is, they know how the project is going to meet that need, and each applicant is really conveying that they have everything that they need to do that without substantial involvement from the federal government. Our part is really to support you in your request, but you are the experts in defining and meeting that request. And then also just to highlight, these are not all meant to provide ongoing annual maintenance and operations. In some cases, you may have need for a specific need in the maintenance and operations aspect that gets you to some next level of impact. But reviewers will really be looking at projects that are looking for a very specific type of impact versus those projects that it's clear the organization just needs to supplement their budget, with ongoing needs. So what is public purpose? I'm highlighting this because there's in some of the applications, the impact or the why these projects were being proposed at times wasn't the strongest parts of the application. When we're looking at these, remember, these are investments that the federal government is being asked to make with some sense of defined impact. So the projects that are better able to define what their intended impact is going to be makes for an easier determination of whether that project is worth the investment. And for us, it really comes down to public purpose. The investments that we're making should have a benefactor that is some segment of the public that you are defining. And I mentioned one of the examples that I give in to highlight this is we had gotten asked by a museum that had a very sensitive collection that they had acquired, and they needed funds to restore that collection. But because the collection was so rare, they really weren't in a position to add it to any of their public programs. It was really going to be preserved and conserved and put away because of the sensitivity around the collection. A great need, definitely something that is worth of an investment, but the way we're looking at the purpose of these grants, that would not have been a competitive project because there was no intention to make that collection ultimately available to the public in some way. A very simplistic example, but that's the kind of thing the reviewers are going to be looking for, that there is some sort of public benefit to this beyond any benefit to the federal partner or to a state partner or to the organization that's applying directly. So just keep that in mind, that is something that the reviewers are going to be looking at, is who is the intended community or audience that's going to benefit from this, and is that adequately defined in the application? So everything that I've explained right now is being guided by two strategic documents within our office. One is a framework on the network. It goes through all the different components of what makes up the Chesapeake Gateways network. So a great read if you haven't become familiar with it. As you're reading through it, you should see yourself in it and find pieces of it that really resonate with the kind of work that you're doing. So as you're writing your proposal, there's language in there that you can utilize that really highlights that you are making a connection to our strategic objectives. And then the strategic plan as well, it defines the two strategic categories that we'll be focused on for this set of grants, but also really paints the strategic picture of where we're trying to go now in the next 3 years over the course of this 5-year strategic plan. And many of you that are in the audience right now, as we go back in 2025 and start thinking about our next strategic plan, We hope that we'll have a whole new round of partners and grantees that will be incorporating into the next strategic plan. But those documents are available to review, and there's links to them in the notice of financial assistance. Okay, I see another grant question coming. Will we be able to view these grants? We'll have to see what we're able to post because the works are going to be works in progress. But at the very minimum, you'll be able to get a sense of the application or the topic and at least an abstract write-up of what they're intending to do. So that'll give you a sense of. But I also do want to caution everyone. I should have started with this. The statistics from last year. We had, because it was our first year, we aggregated 2 years worth of funding. So we had about 2.2 million with some year-end dollars added to it to give away, but we received almost $10 million in requests. We had over 90 applicants. So we are anticipating a pretty healthy, robust application process as well this year. But the projects did not fit any standard formula. A lot of the benefit for us in this is having the network tell us what their needs are and how they think those needs can be best addressed. So we're nowhere near a point where we're really settling on the types of projects that we would like to see. I think we're still at a point where we want to be happily surprised at how organizations and institutions are seeing needs around them and being able to convey those needs through this grant application process. So, definitely take a look at what was funded, but that is going to be by no means a menu of the types of projects. I'd rather you work with what you see as a need so that we at least get that sense. And if it's not competitive, there'll be opportunities for you to potentially address that in future grant cycles.
Thank you, Eddie. Another question we had, so I think you answered B's question about receiving about their application had been approved this year. Can they reapply for something completely different? It sounds like that's a yes. And thanks to those who added in the chat. And Meg, I had a follow-up question. If we resubmit the past application, is all of that work saved in the grant portal?
Unfortunately, it is not. Every grant cycle is brand new, and that's just built into federal grants. That's not a Park Service policy. Each grant opportunity zeroes out. Because each program is meant to stand alone. There's nothing in our systems where we can go back into a past grant and pull it into the next grant opportunity. Every applicant has to go through the process of submitting a new application so that it's logged against that new funding opportunity. And then we get involved after the application closes. So the whole grants.gov process, even though we put the notice up there, that's an aggregated web portal for grants that's the entire federal government uses. So that's why everything has to start from scratch every cycle. And then because of that, we won't be looking at what was submitted last year. It may be an entirely different review committee, so they won't have any sort of connection or awareness of what you applied with last year. So you're able to fully recycle your proposal or come up with something totally new.
Thank you. Bob Campbell, did you have?
Yeah, Eddie, I was just going to note that folks are continuing to ask about the access to the list of successful 2023 applicants, which I think we should probably have available by the end of this month, right, the end of this fiscal year, and we can post that on the website. But there's also just interest in whether they would be able to view the grants, and I want to read through that question. Just that folks are looking for every bit of guidance and advantage to develop good grants. So just let's be sure and draw their attention to the coming presentations that you're going to do on your logic modeling and budget development. Those will be really critical for folks.
Thanks for highlighting that, Bob. Yeah, if what's driving those questions about the past grants is wanting to get a better sense of what's in a grant proposal, stay tuned because we'll cover that later on today. Because we can't make their actual proposals available to you. You'll get a sense of what the application is and the project's focus through an abstract. But the applications themselves is not something that I can share. But no worries, we have plenty of resources available to you. None of this should be done with any sort of guesswork. Okay, so we're getting to about half hour and I've still got 30 slides here. So let me just keep going. I mentioned the two grant categories, similar, the same as last year, Major Inclusive Interpretive Initiatives with an equity lens, and then promoting resilient communities and landscapes through tourism, sustainability, conservation, and local economies. A lot of different kinds of projects can fit within one of those two. You don't have to apply to both. We did have a lot of proposals last year that addressed both of them. Again, if that helps provide clarity to your intended impact, go for it. But in some cases, they were confusing them. The proposal confused itself by trying to accommodate both grant categories. So if it's going to be difficult for the reviewers to understand what you're going it for, then just be mindful that they're going to have a bunch of other proposals to review. So just keep things as clear as possible. Within the major interpretive initiatives, this is really focused on where we're engaging underrepresented places in telling their stories, helping to tell a more complete range of stories. And then facilitating that connection between messaging and conservation. And then there's some sort of ladder of engagement through inclusive interpretation where you're bringing folks in to the message. I did include a link here to a webinar that our training specialist, Brittany Hall, did on advancing inclusive interpretation if you want to learn more about this particular topic. So when you get the slides, you'll see a link to the YouTube webinar on this topic. We do go through in the notice some sample ideas to kind of get your head thinking around what we mean. So it's the things that you would expect. Where are you creating through the storytelling relationships that don't currently exist, or engaging communities that aren't currently being engaged, or engaging them in ways that they're currently not being engaged. So really be thinking about where are there barriers to making connections to your audiences that this a grant could help you address. And then the second one, promoting resilient communities and landscapes. There's a lot that's covered here, and this was probably the grant category that about 2/3 of the applications came in with last year because it was so broad. It can be everything from tourism efforts to stewardship engagement to coordinated community engagement processes, town halls, anything where you're providing community level coordination and advancement of community needs. And then also looking at that large scale equitable access, not beyond just the interpretive content and the stories that you're including, but where is their ability to address infrastructure issues or operational issues that are creating barriers for engagement. And then just looking at the broad connection between the resources at your disposal with tourism, with how the community gets engaged in preserving, protecting, and working with the assets that they have available to them. So a lot of different projects fit within this category. And as you would imagine, the intersection for us is being able to provide some application to the work that we're doing to different audiences. So at the large landscape level, that's generating more public access to linking local nature and cultural resources with tourism and marketing of those efforts, making sure that target communities are being engaged and planned for, One of the other tips that I'll mention from last year is we had a lot of proposals that their activity was meant to increase public participation and public engagement, but there was no sense in who the public was or how they would become engaged. And when you're reviewing two proposals, a proposal that where both are wanting to increase engagement and one has a defined partner that represents that community that they're looking to engage versus one that's just opening the door and hoping the right target audience comes in, the group that has the predefined partnership already established is likely going to become more competitive. So within this area, it's fine to have this be a target, but given the number of proposals I anticipate we're going to get, proposals that go have at least a sense of who would be the target audience, who would represent the those communities, and have a sense of partnership opportunities, that's where you increase your competitiveness in working with underrepresented communities or engaging new audiences. A quick rundown of the eligible entities. Again, these are defined in the notice, but the thing to highlight is that any of your for-profit and small business partners in your community can apply. The value, again, to us is the types of projects we are going to see, but also the types of partnerships that there's potential to support. Whether the proposal is successful or not, we do want this process to be a process that helps you engage partners through our grant proposal in ways that you might not have been able to in the past. So definitely use the grant opportunity as a motivator to establish some collaborations that you've been looking at. And then once that collaboration is set, even if you're not successful, you can look at other resources, but at least you've already gotten yourself organized. So think about some of those partners that exist in your community, some of your small businesses, some of the more tourism and service provider entities that might be in your backyard that are where the community has touch points with the Bay, and see what their needs are. The thing to highlight here, and you'll see a couple of questions in the FAQ about it, that the project has to occur in the watershed. Applicants can be from outside the watershed, but the project that they're proposing has to reside within the boundary of the Chesapeake Bay watershed in order for it to be an eligible project for our funding. Okay, so there was a question earlier about seeing last year's proposals. My goal is to make it extremely easy for you to submit this proposal. And I was amazed how many proposals I just went totally off script and gave us pages and pages of information without a real sense of what we needed to see in order to adequately review those proposals. I will say it was pretty clear when somebody was just recycling a proposal without any sense of what we're requesting. And it was very difficult for the reviewers to sift through and get the information that we were looking for. And when you've got 90 proposals, the harder it is for us to sift through, the harder it is for us to rate those proposals. So a lot of those ended up getting scored lower because it was hard to really pull out the information that we needed. So this section, I'm going to walk you through exactly what we need. You should not have to guess. And there are multiple places where we will tell you exactly what we need. So the first one, let's go through some of the mandatory things that are part of any federal budget. Each of you will apply through grants.gov. That once you're enrolled, and I'll mention how to do all that in a second, but the website then walks you through all the different forms that you need to fill out. The SF424 is basically your cover sheet that has all your organization information, how much money you're requesting, very basic details. The 424A, and I'll mention the C in a second, but the 424A is your main budget worksheet that's built into grants.gov. It's where you will fill in all your numbers related to your budget. If you're doing construction, which means you have a construction line item in your budget, you will also have to fill out a 424C. which is the budget worksheet specifically for construction projects. Now, this is different from where a project where construction might be involved, but you will be utilizing a contractor. In those cases, the construction line item fits in with the contractor line, versus if you're doing the construction yourself, you would be submitting it in the construction. I'm not trying to get into a budget discussion here. We're going to have a whole webinar in beginning of October to look at budgeting and federal budgeting in particular, but just wanted to highlight the difference between the 424A and the C. A is the general budget worksheet. C would only be needed if you're going to be doing your own construction. The project abstract is another form you'll fill out that provides us with a summary that then we utilize in our marketing and promotion and publicity in making details of your grants available post-award, like we've been discussing. The detailed budget is all the costs associated with the project, and there's some details on how we would need to see this in the notice. The direct costs, these are your above and beyond overhead costs that you're able to account for. There is a specific rate. It's either 10% unless you have already negotiated another rate with the federal government, meaning you have a letter that says you're allowed to charge this a different percentage. If you don't have that, then the base indirect for everybody is 10%. But that allows you to add 10% to just support, your utilities, all the overhead things that you have as an organization. And then there are other forms that are just required for everybody. Your 424B is an assurances form. There's a lot of places where you will have to tell the federal government, we don't have a conflict, we're not in jeopardy in any other financial grant that we've done with the federal government. So just places where you will say we're not a risk as someone that's going to get invested in. And then the project narrative, which is the specifics of your project. Within the project narrative, okay, I'm gonna right at the very top, no longer than 8 pages. And then this is really to help us adequately review in a timely manner. There were a lot of projects last year that they sent us the 8-page narrative and then 30 or 40 pages of PDFs related to the project, things that they felt. There's going to be a point where you're going to be thinking, oh, if they just knew this piece too, though, they'll see that our project is awesome. Well, the reality is, if it's not part of the 8-page narrative, it's not going to get counted, it's not going to get read, and it's not going to be part of the review. The content that you need to convey really needs to be in that 8-page narrative. We do make some caveats that you are able to provide optional resumes for your team, as well as letters of recommendation, and those are not counted in the 8-page narrative. Neither are the required forms. So again, if you wanted a tip on how to be more competitive, just follow the instructions. 8 pages, make it easy to read, and give the reviewers, make it easier for them to get through the information. You'll hear more about this later, but at the very bottom, I also have a save the date there. We will be doing a webinar on September 26th, where we'll be talking about impact using a tool called logic model, where we'll walk through where's your starting point, what's the activity, and then what is your intended impact, so that you can connect the dots between all three, so that you're able to more adequately describe your impact in your project in these proposals. So stay tuned for that registration information. We'll be sending that out in the next week. Narrative components. Again, we're making it very easy for you to not have to guess at what we're looking for. The project overview, you just structure your proposal in these sections, your purpose, goal, and objective. In some proposals, it was very difficult to understand what the project was seeking to do. The project itself may have been increase the types of stories that are going to be on a particular trail, but no sense as to why. What is it about the trail? Who are the users of the trail? The proposals would jump right into, here's the activity we would like, here's how much it's going to cost, and please fund us. So we really need to have you define that. Again, with the hyperlinks, the reviewers are not going to go to outside websites. The information needs to be contained within the narrative. If you need them to go to an offsite, then that means that's the part of the proposal that's outside of the bounds of what they're going to be reviewing. So just please make the information available within the body of the narrative. Otherwise, you run the risk of that information not being considered. So again, we've done a good job of outlining what we're looking for, and as long as you're following this format, the reviewers are going to be able to align this information with the review criteria that I'll mention in a second. So within review criteria, again, very similar to last year, we did add one. This first one in red, connection to the Chesapeake Bay Initiative Act, because that act drives everything that we do. We need these grants to be able to reinforce the impact that the Initiative Act is trying to address. You do not need references and citations. We're going to assume what you're putting forward to us is valid and is based on sound logic and sound science. So feel free to reference if there are studies that are driving the why or the how in what you're trying to do, but these proposals are not meant to be research papers that need to be fully cited. Okay, continuing on. So just a quick rundown of each of them. Again, all of this is defined in the notice, so you shouldn't have to guess as to what the reviewers are going to be looking for. For the connection to the Chesapeake Bay Initiative Act, essentially, does your project enhance public education of and access to the Chesapeake Bay? And we think this is an important enough factor that it's worth a quarter of the review. So the questions for them is, how well does the project convey that it is enhancing public education and access to the Bay? The next one, connection to one of the two strategic themes. The better you can say our project addresses this theme in this way, again, that makes it easy for the reviewer to say, oh, I see where they're going with this. So the question is, how well did you do that? Connection to equity, inclusion, accessibility, and engagement. This is where a lot of projects will start differentiating themselves, where they'll either be passively defining their audiences and partnerships and collaborations versus those that have defined communities already in mind, or have a sense of what they need to find those communities. So, we just need to know that you're not just, this isn't a build it and they will come kind of formula. It's, build it, and then we need to go find the people to make sure that they benefit. Innovation and project intent. Innovation takes a lot of different forms. For us, it's you defining what is innovative about this. How is this moving you forward in some way? There is no benchmark to this where it needs to be, a tech project or some sort of, super, in the sky type, unrealistic type project. We just want to know where you see the need and how that need plays into the larger picture of what you're trying to accomplish. Your operational plan, again, does your proposal show that you know what's going to need to be done? Do the budget figures relate to the activities that you're proposing? And are you the kind of organization that knows how to do this work? And then your own capacity to actually do the work. Who are you pulling in to address the different components? From there, we go into a review and selection process once the application deadline closes. We'll go through an initial review where we'll just double check that eligibility is met, that all the forms are there, that it is a project in the watershed before it advances to merit review. We will compile a merit review panel that'll be made up of technical experts from across the federal government that would be in a position to read a wide variety of different types of proposals. And then we also go through a equity check within our own office of based on the applications that were submitted and the types of projects that were submitted, are we getting good diversity across the watershed? Since our geography is so wide and the types of projects we can support is so broad, we just want to look at what that end diversity looks like, and then we get to the award process. The schedule right now, and I will caution, this is very fluid. A lot of stuff comes up within federal grant making. This is the target timeline we're looking to follow, but a lot of things come up along the way. In addition, especially if we end up getting a lot of proposals again this year, it extends some of these steps. But right now, the application is open in grants.gov. I'll give you the link in just a second. We're doing the grants overview webinar today. We'll have a logic modeling webinar on the 26th, and then the federal budgeting webinar on the 5th. And then the deadline is the 3rd, and then we move into the review process. All right, the starting line. So at this point, that's the basic walkthrough of what we're going to be looking for, the parameters of the current program. After we finish today, each of you, if you registered last year and submitted last year, and you don't feel the need to get any feedback from last year, you just want to look at your application again and resubmit, you'd be able to go ahead and do that right now. For those that are new to federal grants, and this is the first time you've been going through this, the first step is to register with the System for Award Management, SAM.gov. It's not an NPS system, it's a federal government system, so we're not able to provide any sort of technical assistance in helping you do that. But there are links within both of these sites that will help you. I will caution you that both of these, getting your UEI and registering with SAM.gov is free. As soon as you start searching, you will get links to a lot of consultants that will offer to do this for you for a fee, and it will look like it is part of the process based on how their websites are designed. Just be mindful that this is a free service. You're able to work through the websites themselves through sam.gov to get those processed. We did do a webinar on this last year that I won't have the time to repeat, but we do have the recording available on our YouTube playlist. I put a link here. The sam.gov section starts in 22 minutes into the webinar, but feel free to, any of last year's webinars would be additional background for you if you wanted to sift through them. And then some additional resources to help you. Again, none of this should be guesswork. There's always going to be an opportunity for you to ask a question. We do have a grants landing page that's linked to here where we have frequently asked questions. We've got a checklist. It is a very detailed checklist, folks. I was amazed just how many people did not either follow the structure we had put in the notice or went through the checklist to make sure that all the pieces that we needed were submitted. It's not, I will say it's not a part of your application. You do not need to submit your checklist. If you do, it will get counted against your 8-page limit. So this is really just meant as a tool for you prior to applying that, we walk you through in this field, put in this word, in this step, put in this phrase. So, just please check out that checklist before you hit submit. You can get to the application directly from the grants landing page. That'll connect you to grants.gov. Once you clicked into grants.gov, this is what you would see. Again, you're going outside of the Park Service's website to a federal grants webpage. Once you're there, through our link, you'll get right into the notice. If you ever just go to grants.gov, you can just do a search for the P24 AS 00031, And that's the name of our grant program, and it'll bring up the grants page for us. And then from here, once you do the search and find it or link to it from our webpage, once you're registered in sam.gov, have your UEI, you're able to hit that apply button and start the application process. If you try to hit apply before you get that, it won't let you submit an application because you're technically not eligible yet to apply until you get that sam.gov registration. Everything uses a single login. So if you're new to this, you will also have to create a login for your organization. And there's a whole other process. The good thing is once you go through these hoops, you've done them and they're there already. You would only really need to change up if you have changes in your points of contact or need someone else. Okay, I see a question about critical partnerships be federal entities. The word about partnerships, you can partner with federal entities, but the work itself cannot be seen as benefiting the federal agency solely. They need to either be a partner in the programmatic aspect of what you're proposing or in the design and the development, but the project can't be seen as a project for the federal agency versus a shared audience that you both might have. And federal agencies are also not allowed to be applicants. So the partnership would need to submit through one of the non-federal partners. Consultants and contractors, there's a lot of questions in the FAQ about it. So please consult the FAQ that's on our landing page about consultants and contractors. Basically, the general guidance is you're not able to predetermine a contractor that you would utilize through this grant. If you receive a grant and plan to use contractors, you will need to competitively select them. If you have a contractor you're currently using that was competitively selected, you'd be able to demonstrate that they were, if you can demonstrate they were competitively selected, you could use that contractor. But otherwise, you'll have to set up a competitive process to select them. A lot more answers about consultants in the FAQ. We're getting close to time, so I did want to make sure to highlight the two trainings that we have coming up. Everybody that attended today, or I guess if you didn't, if you're here because somebody forwarded you the invitation and you're not yet on our contact list, I'm going to put an email address in the chat. Just send a note to this email address saying you want to be added to our contact list, and you'll make sure to get all future webinar announcements. But the next two that are going to be coming out will be a registration for the September 26th and a registration for the October 6th webinars. How much of any documentation do we need to provide in your budget for our projected contractual costs? All of that's defined. You will have a budget and a budget narrative that you need to provide. And then all the regulatory stuff does kick in depending on the type of project you are submitting. If your project gets selected, it goes through a budget review where, depending on the project, we will then address any compliance or regulatory issues that your type of project would entail. Okay, and again, just be mindful of where we are in the process. October, we will be scheduling office hours, so there'll be specific times where you'll be able to drop in and ask any questions, and then I'm always available to ask questions that come up. And then I just put this email in the chat, but just so that you have it again, that's the general grants email to ask questions or to give us any updates, and then the link to the landing page.